President Trump's role in subverting our Constitution, attempting to block the peaceful transfer of power, and defending a mob that attacked our Capitol and law enforcement has been well documented. And it's something obviously the president spoke about in terms of that being one of the worst days in our democracy. And he'll speak to, as I noted a little bit earlier, he'll speak to the historical significance of January 6th, what it means for the country 1 year later, the importance of the peaceful transfer of power, which obviously the prior administration and the prior president weren't a part of. But I think there's a larger message here to the country about who we are and who we need to be moving forward.
Does he consider ex-President Trump to be a threat to democracy?
I think he's spoken to this in the past.
Okay. On the same issue, but a little more broadly, the polls keep showing again and again that something like 70% of Trump voters think the election was rigged, that President Biden is not legitimate, and so on. Is there anything that President Biden feels he should have already done, or is anything he feels he still can do to actually talk directly to those people and try and get people's reality to match a bit more in this country?
I think what he's going to continue to do is speak to everyone in the country, those who didn't vote for him, those who may not believe he is the legitimate president, about what he wants to do to make their lives better. And he sees that as his responsibility as the president of the United States. That's what he will continue to do. Go ahead, Anna.
Thanks, Jen. Happy New Year. So Senator Schumer just said that he and Senator Manchin talked numerous times during the break, mostly on voting rights, but also on Build Back Better. And he also says that the White House will be having more talks with Manchin's, quote, participation and cooperation on Build Back Better. So can I ask, did the president and Senator Manchin talk at all over the break?
We obviously confirmed the conversation they had 2 weeks ago. I don't have any more conversations to confirm for you.
Schumer said about more talks in the future. Do you know the next time they'll talk about this?
I'm not going to predict that for you, but I can assure you that the president and members of our senior team will, of course, be in touch with a range of senators who care deeply about moving Build Back Better forward.
Can I clarify something on the
Sure.
testing delivery timeline?
Yeah.
You said the first deliveries go out later this month, then the website goes up, then people can sign up. So probably those tests people can expect end of this month, early February.
Well, I think what I was trying to convey, perhaps not as articulately as I meant to, is that we will put the website up when the tests are available to be sent, right? As to not cause any confusion. So I think the timeline I provided was that for the first delivery from manufacturers will start later this month. And obviously then we will work to get it out the door as quickly as possible.
Given that a lot of experts are saying if Omicron follows the surge it did in South Africa, it could be peaking here as early as next week and probably start declining by the end of the month. Is there some concern that these tests are being provided too late when the worst is already behind us?
Well, I would say first that there's unprecedented demand. We know that right now for tests. There was in advance of the holidays for understandable reasons. People wanted to see loved ones. They wanted to ensure they tested before they saw loved ones. And we were not where we needed to be. We're still not. What we've done is try to do this as quickly as possible through an expedited, accelerated contracting process to ensure that tests are available for free to people across the country as quickly as possible. Now, at the same time, we know that online and in retail stores across the country, they are restocking shelves with tests. That is a good thing. We are continuing to open more federal testing sites, as we have done in New York and different cities that have been hardest hit across the country. And we continue to have 20,000 free sites across the country. So we're not working on one channel. We are doing it as quickly as we can to get these 500 million tests in our hands, doing it through an accelerated, expedited process. But we've also taken a number of additional steps to ensure the federal testing sites, just to note, are in New Jersey, DC, New York City, and Philadelphia. Those are some of the places, just to give you a sense. And we'll continue to build on that, which we have the capacity to do.
Given the surge that we're seeing now, is it fair to say if those free tests had been made available earlier, before the holidays, before people traveled and more contact and gatherings occurred, would we not be seeing the same numbers we're seeing today? Wouldn't it have prevented some of that spread?
I don't know that we can make a prediction of that. It's a good question to ask the doctors. Look, I would say, though, and again, reiterate, as the president said before Christmas, we were not where we needed to be. What he did do is he quadrupled our testing capacity from the summer to December. He made 50 million tests available at rural health centers and community health centers in December to expand that access. We opened these federal testing sites in December. So these were steps we took to, as quickly as possible, expedite our capacity, even in December, as the unprecedented demand was rising, and doing everything we could at an accelerated pace. Of course, we would have liked to have more in our hands earlier.
Can I
Go ahead.
follow up
Oh, go ahead.
just child tax credit question. We know those aren't going to hit families' accounts this month, right?
Yeah.
Even though there's relief down the line, but for families who were relying on it month to month, is there any talk of executive action or anything from the White House to provide more relief for them?
We are always looking at how we can help provide relief to American families and the American people. If Build Back Better were to pass in February, there is an option of doing retroactive checks. But I would note that our objective is to get this passed. The president wants to see the child tax credit extended. Go ahead.
Follow up on testing then, if it's going to take that long.
I should say in January. Sorry, in January to do February, if that makes sense. Yeah, go ahead.
Along those same lines.
Okay.
For people who see those long testing lines, you have more sites, but it's cold out. People don't want to wait in that. You swing by CVS, there are no tests. While waiting for all this expanded capacity, what is your advice to people who may be going back to college and want to take a test, or they want to go see their grandparents, or whatever it might be? If their workplace says, we want you to take a self-test before you walk in, what can people do in the meantime until that capacity does get built up?
Well, it depends on the person. So this is a hard question to answer, but I would say that there are still many doctor's offices that are administering tests. If somebody has health insurance, that's something that you can go do. Everyone does not have health insurance. There are community health centers, rural health centers. You can go look online and see if there is one near you and go to that. We have just opened a number of federal testing sites in New Jersey, DC, New York City, and Philadelphia. We will continue to expand those big federal testing sites. And we have 20,000 free sites across the country. Different communities and states are taking different steps. Some libraries are providing tests. Some community buildings are providing tests. It really depends community to community. If tests are required, there's a number of steps that people can take, and we're working to expand that as quickly as possible.
You had mentioned rising cases. The president mentioned rising cases a little while ago. Every doctor has said that. We've also heard from Dr. Fauci and other doctors saying that's not the number to look at. We know they're going to go up, but maybe hospitalizations is.
I think. Yeah, that's an important point.
What's the president's barometer? Is there one number that he kind of gauges to get an idea of where the country is right now?
Well, what I was trying to say in response to Ed's question, again, maybe not as articulately as I'd like, is as Dr. Fauci said, one of the areas that we are concerned about and focused on is hospital capacity, and that how that is impacting medical professionals and the capacity for hospitals to take people in. So we look at a range of metrics, but we certainly look at that as we see rising cases. It is fortunate in many areas that the vast majority, if not all, of the people who are going to hospitals are unvaccinated. Not in every community; it depends community to community. So that's why we are also continuing to echo and advocate for people to get vaccinated, to get boosted, to protect themselves. That's the most important step they can take. But certainly, as Dr. Fauci said, we are looking at and concerned about hospitalizations or capacity given hospitalizations. Go ahead in the back.
Back to testing. How can employers be obligated to test unvaccinated workers when there's such a shortage right now? And what will OSHA do when it starts enforcing this rule in a few days when employers say, well, sorry, we can't comply because we can't find any tests?
Well, I would first say that 2/3 of companies, almost 2/3 of companies, have taken steps to put in place either vaccination requirements or testing requirements. They're all implementing it in a different way, and the leadership of these companies is making a decision about what works best for their workforce. Giving that option is something certainly we support. Obviously, getting vaccinated, they're free across the country, available across the country, is also a very easy option for many people, and many companies are opting to do that. As OSHA works to implement and work with companies to do that, our objective and what we're continuing to focus on is continuing to increase capacity of free tests that are targeted more, though, at individuals and households, less than companies. And obviously to there's now 9 tests that are approved to go to market that different companies and different school districts and others can have direct contact with. So there's a range of ways to get access to tests, and we're working to increase capacity to make them free and accessible to households and individuals across the country.
Are you saying it's up to workers to find tests themselves if they must be tested to go to work rather than their employer?
Actually, I'm saying, and I think what I said pretty clearly, is that different companies, about 60% of them have already implemented, are implementing the test or vaccine requirements in different ways, company to company, employer to employer. So, and many of them have done it extremely successfully, including many of the airlines, a number of huge hospital systems. And this has helped remember what the objective is here. The objective is to make workplaces safer, to provide more security to people. If you look at the data that just came out this morning, JOLTS, that was a shout out to Bloomberg. They'll get that reference. Data that came out today, there are still many people who are fearful about going back to work. That is one of the reasons why it's important to put in place these requirements and why employers have taken the step to provide that certainty to people in their workplaces as well.
I want to ask one more question related to the workforce. The White House Labor Task Force, led by Vice President Harris, was supposed to release a report in October about how the federal government can boost unionization in this country in a variety of employers. It's January 4th and that report has not come out yet. What's going on? And do the president and vice president still care about this initiative given everything else that's going on?
I would say the president has been an advocate for collective bargaining rights, for the rights of workers, for strong unions, for 5 decades of his career. And I think that speaks for itself. And the vice president, a little younger, not in public office quite as long, but has also been a strong advocate for the rights of workers. And so I think that speaks for itself. Of course, this is an initiative they put forward. I'm certain I can check on the status of the report. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. A couple of topics, if you don't mind. As you know, the anniversary of the opening of Guantanamo Bay Detention Facility is next week.
Yeah.
The president promised to close it. You reiterated that in February. What's taking so long?
Well, let me first say that the National Security Council continues to work closely with the Departments of Defense, State and Justice, and other departments and agencies to do exactly that. I would note, and I know this was put out during a very crazy holiday period of time, but in the president's statement on the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2022, he outlined that Section 1032 of the Act continues to bar the use of funds to transfer Guantanamo Bay detainees to the custody or effective control of certain foreign countries. And Section 1033 of the Act bars the use of funds to transfer Guantanamo Bay detainees into the United States unless certain conditions are met. And it's a longstanding position of the executive branch that those provisions unduly impair the ability of the executive branch to determine when and where to prosecute Guantanamo Bay detainees. In some circumstances, these provisions could make it difficult to comply with the final judgment of a court that has directed the release of a detainee. In addition to limitations in Section 1032 of the Act constrain the flexibility of the executive branch with respect to its engagement in delicate negotiations with foreign countries over the potential transfer of detainees. There are only 39 remaining individuals at Guantanamo Bay, but I just wanted to highlight that piece that was in the NDAA statement because we feel it's obviously creating burden and a hindrance to our progress here.
So it's the transfer to the foreign countries that's causing delays, essentially.
Well, I think I listed three clear pieces there and limitations on how funding can be used and how this Section 1032 also limits at times how an individual can be released, as well as how we can negotiate and communicate with foreign countries about
Some of them have been waiting trials for years. Why is that taking so long?
Again, I would say this is what we see as one of the major, if not the major hindrance. Beyond that, I would point to the Department of Defense, but there are 39 remaining individuals there, and obviously our commitment continues to be to close Guantanamo Bay.
One other topic, the Iranian president said yesterday, as the talks begin in Vienna again, that former President Trump should be put on trial for the killing of General Soleimani. Wondering if I can get a reaction to that and whether that hinders discussions around Iran's nuclear future this week.
Well, I would say that I don't have any direct comment on his comments. I would note that he has his own politics and his own audience that he speaks to, just as many country leaders in other countries do. But right now, Special Envoy Malley is currently leading an interagency delegation to the 8th round of talks in Vienna, which resumed on January 3rd. There was modest progress in talks last week, and we hope to build on that this week. What is clear is that if we do not soon reach an understanding on mutual return to compliance, Iran's accelerating nuclear steps will hollow out the JCPOA. So our priority remains reaching and implementing a rapid mutual return. And I expect those negotiations will focus on those topics at hand, not comments of any leaders around the world. Go ahead.
A couple different topics here as well. First, from the administration's point of view, given what we've learned from the January 6th Select Committee, does it appear the Capitol riot played some kind of role in an overall coordinated effort to overturn the democratic process? So something longer, perhaps, and more than just one day.
Just so I understand your question, are you saying, talk a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more what you're trying to ask.
Yeah, sure. So there's the isolated events of that day, but there's
Yeah.
also the investigation that goes back much further and spans more time. Does it appear that there's that sort of longer throw there than just what occurred on January 6th at the Capitol, based on what we know from the Select Committee?
Well, I'm not going to speak for the Select Committee, and obviously they will speak for when the conclusion of their report will be and what details. I would note that we have conveyed our concern in the past about the fact that many Republican members of Congress have stood by the big lie since then. They were outraged at the time, about many of them, about the events that happened on January 6th. Who could not be? Who was watching them? And since then, they have done nothing to help support the work of the committee, to help argue against the big lie. And, you know, that sort of lack of action, inaction, silence, you know, is something that is irresponsible as well. Go ahead.
Another,
Go ahead.
sorry, another from Todd Gilman, a fellow C-suite
Sure.
rotation at the Dallas Morning News. Does the White House have a reaction to Senator Cruz saying President Biden may be impeached if the Republicans take back the House next year, specifically for the border policies?
Well, our reaction is maybe Senator Cruz can work with us on getting something done on comprehensive immigration reform and putting in place measures that will help make sure smart security is what we see at the border, taking a more humane approach to the border instead of name calling, accusation calling, and making predictions of the future. Go ahead.
Thank you, Jen. I have questions about voting rights and also about political appointments. On voting rights, the midterm elections are 10 months away. Is the president concerned that the window is closing to pass legislation that could have an impact on how people vote in the midterm elections?
I'm not going to make a prediction of that. What I will say, and what the president will talk about in his speech on Thursday, is also that, you know, people came out, the American public came out in record numbers last November and participated in our democracy. And we shouldn't underestimate the role of the movement and grassroots movement of the public to have their voices heard. But he absolutely feels that getting voting rights done is fundamental. It's essential. He's going to work in close lockstep with Leader Schumer and others in Congress to get this done. But I'm not going to make a prediction at this point on the timeline. It's obviously a first priority for them in the Senate.
Is it a first priority for the president?
Yes, he's working with Leader Schumer on it.
In December, he said at South Carolina State University, we're going to keep up the fight until we get it done. What does that look like? What does the fight look like for voting rights for President Biden?
It means getting it passed into law and signing it into law.
What steps is he taking over the next several weeks to make that happen?
Well, I would first say that the president has, you can expect to hear more from him soon, and I'm not going to get too far ahead of that, but the president has taken a range of steps within his own authority on voting rights, whether it is signing a historic executive order early in his presidency, supporting the efforts of the Department of Justice to increase funding for the protection of people's fundamental rights across the country. And he also spoke to his commitment or openness to making changes to the process to protect people's constitutional rights, should that be the point we get to. This is obviously going to be front and center on the Senate's agenda when they return, and he's looking forward to being a part of that.
On political appointments, the president right now has had 266 political appointments confirmed by the Senate. That is roughly on par where President Trump was in his administration at this time. It's about 100 less than where Presidents Obama and Presidents Bush were at this time in their first years in office. Is that lower number of political appointments impacting how President Biden can govern and implement his policies within the executive branch?
Well, so just for the specific numbers, and you gave a number of these, but we ended 2021, I should say, with more than 300 of President Biden's nominees for Senate confirmed positions pending confirmation by the Senate. Approximately half were on the executive calendar and awaiting a floor vote, just to give you all a sense, meaning they could have moved forward. More of these could have moved forward. Many of our nominees have received overwhelming support and majorities from Democrats and Republicans. And the process for most of the time in the Senate was wound up in lengthy debates when really there could have been unanimous consent votes and moved a member of them forward. So the president's view is, of course, having the people that he has nominated, selected, highly qualified individuals, leading departments, running different parts of agencies, small, large agencies that impact people's lives across the country, is important and imperative to getting his agenda done. And moving things forward. Obviously, there are career employees who ensuring effectively that agencies are running, but of course, he wants to have his team in place, his people leading these agencies to continue to move his agenda forward.
Does he want the Senate and Senate leadership to spend more floor time on pushing nominations through?
Well, I think there's a way to move them forward without consuming hours and hours and days of floor time. We've seen some agreements, and we were encouraged by the agreement that happened right before the winter holiday to move a number of nominees forward, and we're hopeful we can push more forward in the weeks ahead.
There's still 141 positions where there has been no nominee put forward. Why is that?
Again, I think the president, one, is eager to have these nominees. He has nominated, confirmed. That's something the Senate can do, Congress can do. And there are nominations. He wants to find the right person to fill the position. Go ahead, last one.
Thank you, Jen, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I have two questions, one for a colleague who couldn't be here.
Okay.
My first one is Tesla opened an electric car showroom last week in Xinjiang. Just days after President Biden signed the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act into law. Does the White House have any comment on, and will it do more to discourage American companies from doing business in Xinjiang?
Sure, yes. So I can't speak to the specific situation of one company, but as a general matter, we believe the private sector should oppose the PRC's human rights abuses and genocide in Xinjiang. The international community, including the public and private sectors, cannot look the other way when it comes to what is taking place in Xinjiang. As we've said before, companies that fail to address forced labor in their supply chains and other human rights abuses face serious legal, reputational, and customer risks, not just in the United States, but in Europe and around the world. And we've been clear about our views on the ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang. We will continue to hold the PRC accountable. I would also note that we're committed to taking action to ensure our supply chains are free from forced labor, including with the bipartisan Uyghur Force Prevention Act the president signed last month, and obviously our continued leadership on the world stage.
And one more is on, in light of the surge of Omicron variant and many events like the 2+2 security talks going virtual, is the U.S. considering shifting this month's U.S.-ASEAN summit to a virtual format, or will you still do in person?
I don't have any changes to the format to preview at this point in time, but we'll check and we'll keep you all updated. Thanks so much, everyone.